No. So let us proceed forward. Now the next thing that we're going to be doing is as I told you at the beginning, the best way for learning anything new is doing it hands-on, right? It's like programming is like any other skill, guys. It is like driving, it is like swimming. You cannot see Michael Phelps and start swimming the next day morning. Or you cannot see your father drive and start driving just like that. We cannot learn those things just by observing. We have to do it. Similarly, programming is also a skill, and a skill can be learned only by doing things hands on. So, what have we done today in today's workshop? I've chosen one particular exercise. Which will give us an overview, okay, of the programming language. So it is going to give us an overview of the programming language that will give you a deeper understanding of things. So for this, let me start sharing my screen. Let me start sharing my screen. So what we're going to be building is we're going to be going ahead and building a guess game. Now, by building this particular game, we're going to be exploring some of the features of the JavaScript language. All right, and also the question that one of the participant had, Gautam, that is how do people build softwares, right? That is something that you'll get a glimpse of, how to approach a problem and how to build a particular software. You're going to be getting an overview of this. So what is this particular thing going to consist of? What we'll do, the features in this particular game that we would be building is player should guess the generated target number within a specified number of tries. Okay, when somebody is playing this particular game, so there will be a number that is going to be generated, and the player has to guess that particular number in a specific number of times. The second requirement is while the user is guessing, show oops guess was high if the guess number is greater than the target number or the random number. For example, random number that we generate is 50 when the user guesses 70. So then we have to say oops, your guess was high. If he guesses the number as 30, we should say oops, guess was low. Now if the user guesses the number correctly, then we have to congratulate him, saying good job, you've guessed my number, so and so. Now in case he finishes all his chances, he runs out of all his chances, we need to show what the random number was. Okay, we need to show the user what that particular random number was. So this is going to be the game that we're going to be building, and you'll be surprised, just a small simple exercise like this, many aspects of a programming language we are going to be exploring. Okay, so we're going to be exploring concepts like variables, we're going to be exploring concepts called as methods, conditional statements, loops, functions. These are all the kind of things we're going to be going over in the next 1.5 hours time, 1.5 to 2 hours time. Are you all excited? I want you to type in excited, or I want you to type in IE, I am excited. Super. Now, what we'll do is, before we start writing the JavaScript code, we need some project setup. Okay, we'll need some project setup. The base for this particular project, I will share a link with you. Go to that particular link, copy the initial piece of code that is going to be required for building the game. Okay, so I will share the link with you all now. I will share the link with you all now. Hold on, everyone meeting. Okay, I want you to go to this particular link. In that, copy this basic HTML structure that has been present. Okay, just open that particular link. And whatever this basic HTML which is there, you copy all of that. Come back to your file that you guys have created. Which file is that? You guys had created a file, isn't it? Game.html. I want you to paste it there. So once you finish this, good, Yashwant, I want you to message done. Very good. Nice. Now again, those of you who do not have VS Code installed for today's workshop, don't worry. Okay, don't try to sit and download and try to catch up. Don't do that. Instead, take your paper, take a notebook and a pen. You follow along with this. Is that clear? After the workshop is over, then you transfer the code onto your file. But now I want all of your attention here. Okay, good. First and foremost, I'll give you 2 minutes time to just look at the requirements and have a picture of what the problem that we are trying to solve. Next, we'll get into the coding part. Okay. So the time now is 6:43. Take 2 minutes time to just read through this, and then we will start coding this. Okay, great. I hope all of you had sufficient time in going over the task that we're going to be solving. Now, I want you to make a note of this in your notebook, or if you're doing it digitally, if you've created a Word document, make a note of this whenever you're building any project or working on any kind of a task. Go back and refer to this. A good plan is work half done. Let me repeat. A good plan is work half done. Many a times when people start solving any kind of a task, the first thing that they do is they try to rush to the computer and try solving it. In fact, that is not what you should be doing. But instead, you think on paper, as in kind of conceptualize and take the entire problem, break it down to smaller pieces, and then try to see how you can solve each of the smaller piece. So if you have a very big project, don't try to build the entire project at once because it will get very intimidated or it will feel very complex. But instead, if you kind of break it down into smaller pieces and try achieving to solve each of the small piece, that will always be how you're going to be building some softwares. Now let me give you an example. Whenever there's a festival at home, your mom would be preparing a feast, as in variety of food items, isn't it? By the time you go sit for lunch, around 10-15 items she would have prepared for that particular festival, isn't it? Some special items. Now, maybe your mother is a project manager or not, I don't know. But how well she executes, by the time it is 1:30 in the afternoon, isn't all that food ready to be served? How does she do it? Now, at the beginning, she knows that, okay, I need to prepare a feast. My family has to be happy with the delicious food that I'm preparing. Now, does she try to do everything at once? No, isn't it? What she'll do? She'll make a list of all the food items that she has to prepare. One by one, she'll start preparing it, isn't it? In the same way, you don't have to go very far to learn what are the characteristics for a good software developer. I'll tell you today. If you go the next room, enter your kitchen, just observe how your mother is working. From her itself, you will learn all the skills required to become a world-class software developer. You will see today. I'll try to bring in a lot of references to what happens in a house kitchen and see how we can incorporate, we can imbibe those qualities within us to become good software developers. Yeah. So the first and foremost always starts with a plan. Now you know that this is the overall thing that needs to be accomplished. Now it's important that you kind of break down into smaller tasks and smaller chunks. Okay, let's get started. So I've gone on to break it down into 7 subtasks. Each of the subtasks we will code it. I will explain to you the coding and you will also code along with me. That's what is going to be happening today. First and foremost, what we would want is we want to prompt the user to enter their name. We have to use their name and print a greeting. That's the first thing that we will do. So whenever a person plays our game, the first thing is we will ask him, okay, what is your name? Right? Enter the name. We will read that particular input from the user and then we will print. Welcome to the game, so and so. Now, one thing I would like to bring to your attention is whenever you're doing front end and when it comes to the user interface, there is something called as HTML. How many of you have heard about HTML here? All of you? Yes? I want you to type me if you've heard about HTML. Okay, very good. So what HTML basically does is that's going to be your user interface. What the user gets to see on the web page is going to be through HTML. JavaScript is adding the behaviors to it. But for today, we are not going to get into HTML, right? We are not going to be doing things that appears on the web page, but instead we would want to show it at the console level. Okay, whatever we're going to be building, We're going to be dependent on the console, and there we're going to be executing our stuff. Because we are focusing predominantly on JavaScript today and not HTML, that's the reason, one. And the second thing is you have to keep in mind, whenever you give input in any software, how will you typically do it? When you're giving input, let's say you're registering into a website or you're logging into a website. How will you log into a website generally? What will be using? Okay, you're giving username. Okay, very good. In terms of technical aspect, are you aware what that particular piece of component they will be using? Input command. Okay, good. That is one, but there's a name for it in terms of HTML. Are you guys aware of it? Text box, login credentials, input field. Okay, very good. You guys are very close. Basically, you will have something called as a form. Input field is a part of the form. Okay, like text box, input field, these are all part of a form. So whenever a user has to interact with a website, there will always be a HTML form that is going to be used. But today what we'll do is, because we are not focusing on the HTML, we will look at different ways of taking inputs from the user. So the first task is what? We will prompt the player to enter their name. We will use their name to print a greeting. Okay, so that's the first thing. What is the second task? We then want to generate a random number from 1 to 100 or 0 to 100 and store it as a target number for the player to guess. Now, here is where some logic has to be written. The system does not know what the random number is or target number is, but we will have to write some code that is going to help us generate a random number. Now we will see how we can do that with JavaScript. That is the second task. The third task, we have to keep track of how many guesses the player has made, and before each guess we have to tell him how many guesses are left for him. So we'll assume around 5 guesses. Within 5 guesses we expect the player to guess that particular number. That's the third task. Now again we have to ask the user, isn't it? We have to ask, okay, tell me, can you guess my number? How many chances are we giving him? We are giving him 5 chances. So each time we have to ask him, okay, guess the number, what that particular input you can guess. There should be a way of doing it. And after we have read that input from the user, then we have to apply some kind of a logic. Is it greater or is it lesser? Or is it equal to the particular number, right? So if the guess is less, we'll say, oops, your guess was less. If the guess is high, we'll say, oops, your guess was high. If it is the correct guess, then we will congratulate him as per the requirement. And then finally, if the player runs out of turns, then we will tell him, maybe I'll just increase the font size of this. Yeah. Then we will tell him that, hey, you ran out of the turns, and this is what my target number is. Yeah? Does this make sense? So whenever you're trying to solve a particular problem, it is important that you kind of break it down into smaller tasks. How do we identify? That's a skill, right? Maybe overnight this might not be developed, but if you consistently keep solving programs, consistently keep solving assignments, then you will be able to become good in identifications. Remember, I gave you one website named HackerRank. So you can go to that particular website. There you can take up some programming exercises. If you spend time there, try solving their basic exercises first. Don't take up interview questions. I find many of the students do that. They will first want to solve the interview questions. Don't do that, because it's going to be a little difficult. So start with a basic exercise. Okay? Start with the basic exercise, solve it. Once you get a little confidence, then go on to a little more difficult one. It's like this. It's like going to a gym. When you enter a gym, you don't want to lift the most heavy weights because you want to build muscle like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Hrithik Roshan, isn't it? You cannot do that. You will always have to start with a lighter weights, and then slowly you have to keep increasing your weights. Your objective might be good. You want to have a very athletic body and very good physical presence, but you don't want to start lifting heavy weights right at the beginning. So, in the same way, when you're trying to solve exercises, take simple exercises first and then slowly keep increasing the complexity. Don't get too overexcited because they have an interview question from Netflix or from Google. Don't try to solve it. Go step by step. Okay. Super. Now, what we will do, now that we have a fair idea as to what are the tasks that we will solve, the way we're going to be solving is going to be this. We will take up each of the tasks and then try to solve it one by one. Are you all ready for it? I want to type BIO. Bring it on. Awesome. Very nice. So first and foremost, so what you have here is a standard HTML form. Okay, this is the most basic HTML that you would ever get to use. One thing you have to keep in mind is if you want to execute JavaScript, make a note of this. If you want to execute JavaScript on the browser is what? It's your front end or your client side. Make a note of this. If you want to execute JavaScript on the front end, you have to write the JavaScript code inside a HTML file. Let me repeat. If you want to execute JavaScript on the front end, you have to write JavaScript code inside a HTML file. If you want to execute JavaScript outside the browser, you need to have Node.js installed. Okay, so watch this. On your front end, and then you have your backend. Now on your front end, if you want to execute JavaScript, there should be a HTML file inside that HTML file. You can write JavaScript code. Now the question is, why is that? Because at the end of the day, this HTML file is what is run on the browser. Remember Chrome or Firefox. You don't run a JavaScript file on a Firefox. You run a HTML file on a Firefox or Chrome. So if you want to execute JavaScript, you have to write it inside an HTML file. That means to say your entire React, Angular, Vue.js, all of this, at the end of the day, is written inside an HTML file, and then that HTML file is run on the browser. Now, if you want to execute JavaScript on the backend, okay, if you want to execute JavaScript on the backend, you need to have Node.js installed. Only inside Node.js will you be able to run JavaScript. That's how it is. I don't want to get into Node and the entire architecture of Node, but just be aware that if you want to execute JavaScript outside the browser, you need to have Node.js installed. If you want to execute it inside a file, you need to have inside HTML, or on the front end, you need to have it inside HTML. Does this make sense? I want you to type MS if this makes sense. Okay, good. Let's come back. Let's go back to our code. So hence, what we are now doing is we have this particular simple HTML file that has been created. Just to give you a section, if you want to indicate a HTML file, you will start with a syntax doc type HTML. This will indicate that it is a HTML5 syntax that you're going to be using. So there are different versions of HTML. The latest is HTML5. When you write this particular line, a browser will know what type of HTML you are using. Then you'll use your HTML tag, and it's more like a tree structure. HTML is written in a tree structure. Inside that you have a head tag, and then you have basically something called as a body tag. Again, I don't want to get into all the specifics of this in today's class, but I just want to give you an overview of whatever it is. So at the end of the day, anything that has to be displayed to the user on the browser, okay, on the browser, on the web page, you're going to be writing in the body tag. Anything that you have, if you write anything here, it's going to be displayed on the browser. Okay. Now the question becomes, because I have a HTML file, can I just think about using JavaScript? The answer is no. Okay. Just because I have an HTML file, I just cannot start writing JavaScript code. But instead, what I can do, or what we have to do, what we'll have to do is we first have to create something called as a script tag. One thing you'll find in HTML is you'll always have an opening tag and a closing tag. So if we want to execute JavaScript on the browser, we have to write it inside an HTML file. In that file, there should be a script tag, and whatever we write inside the script tag, okay, whatever we write inside the script tag is now going to be treated as JavaScript. Now watch this. Okay, don't code along with me, guys. I will give you time. Okay, don't worry. When I'm explaining, I want you to just listen to me, make points, take down notes. I'll give you specific time, dedicated time I'll give you to take down the source code. Okay, so don't code along with me. So what I will do is I want to run this. What I'll do is I'll right click on the file name. I'll right click on the file name. I'll click on copy path, and then I will open this particular file, and you can see when I run this, it gives me a pop-up. It gives me an alert message which says this page says hi there. If I click on OK, that goes away. So it's a very clear indication that some kind of a behavior happened. Like for example, I could just do something like 2 plus 2. I will save the file. Because I have the Chrome already running, I will reload the browser. You can see that it gives me an output of 4. So there is some programming logic already being applied. Now what's going to happen if I don't write this inside a script tag and I write this outside the script tag? Remember what I told you. Inside HTML file, you just cannot write JavaScript code and expect it to work. It will not work. What is that you're supposed to do? You have to have a script tag, and inside that, whatever you write is now going to be treated as JavaScript. Okay. So now what I'll do is if I go back, run the file, you can see it is part of my web page, but it never executed and gave me any kind of an output. This is part of my web page. It's never gave me any kind of an output. So you need to write this inside here. Go ahead, give this a try. Create a script tag. Right click on this particular file. Copy path. Open it in your browser. Execute the file. Okay, execute the file. So you get the output of 4. Once you do all of this, I want you to message done. Okay. Now let us take step-by-step approach in completing this particular task. So the first thing it says, we have to prompt the player to enter their name, and we have to use their name to print a greeting. So because we're not going to be doing HTML for now, we're going to be using some of the browser features that we can benefit from. And anything that we need to do, we will console log it. So where will my console be? If I need to keep that particular file open, just don't close that. So you will find the console when you open this particular file on your browser, right click. Okay, I want you to right click, and then if you come below, there's an option called as inspect. Click on inspect, and then this window is kind of going to open up right now. You might either find it at the bottom or you might find it on the right hand side. It depends. Okay, you might either find it at the bottom or you might find it at the right hand side. And in that, you have this option called as console. So this is what we're going to be using for interfacing with our code. I want you to type B if it's on the bottom. I want you to type R if this is on the right hand side. Okay, so for some of you it is at the bottom, for some of you on the right hand side. So those of you who have it on the right hand side or at the bottom, just click on these 3 dots. Okay, you can position it where you want. If you want it at the bottom, just select this. If you want it on the right, just select this. These 3 dots you will find. Select those 3 dots and you can now place it wherever you wish to. Okay, now where is your dock? Is it at the bottom or is it on the right? For people who had it on the right, is it B or R? So for people who had it on the right, now is it on the B or is it at the bottom? You can place it wherever you want. Okay, just select this. So right now if I do this, it goes to the right. If I now select this, it comes to the bottom. Okay, good. It's also a personal choice. If you want to read it on the right, keep it there. If you want to keep it at the bottom, keep it here. It's fine. Okay, so this is where our interface is going to be. Whatever we're going to be taking inputs and displaying, we're going to be doing it here. Okay, super. Now, first and foremost, what's the first task? So the first task is we need to prompt the player to enter their name and use their name to print a greeting. So this brings us to one of the fundamental concepts in any programming language, that is introduction to a variable. You need a variable. Now, what is the purpose of a variable? Variables are used for storing values in a computer program. You can make notes of it along the way. Variables are used for storing values in a computer program. Now, why do we need a variable here? Because in this particular program that we are writing, whatever the input the user is giving, I want to store it in my program so that I can use it now or I can access it at a later point of time. So variables does 2 things: store values in a computer program, use it now or at a later point in time. These are the 2 purposes of it. If you're talking about an e-commerce store, would an e-commerce store like Amazon or Flipkart use variables? Absolutely yes. They would be using variables. Like for example, whenever you add an item to your cart, right? You're shopping on an Amazon's website, you want to add an item to the cart, you click on add to cart. So what is happening? That particular item is now being added into your cart. So what's happening? There would be a cart variable where the item that you have added to the cart is stored in that particular variable. Again, sticking to Amazon, there is a product. Product information is basically stored and it is displayed to the user. Even there, variables are going to be used. I want to store the name, I want to store the price, I want to store the description. For all of that, we need variables. Now, in our current program, why do we need variables? Because we want to somehow take an input from the user and store it in a variable, and I have to use that particular variable value to print a greeting. Now, how do we take an input from the user? Typically, if you're doing web development, input and all is taken using a HTML form. Now, because we are not going to be doing HTML, we'll use one of the browser's inbuilt method. It is called as the prompt method. Method is some kind of a behavior. It's a function. What is the prompt method doing? The behavior is, you will see in a second, it will give you an input field where the user can give some input, and whatever the user has entered, you will save it into a variable. So what we will now do is we will first create our variable called as username. Okay. Now for creating a variable, there are different things that we have to keep in mind. First and foremost, we have to specify or we have to declare a variable. Now to declare a variable, there are different ways of doing it with JavaScript. In the past, if you want to declare a variable, we were using the var keyword. I will say var username. So what do I mean by in the past? Now this is where we're going to get into the crux of things. You need to keep in mind that there are two active versions of JavaScript right now used in the industry. You as JavaScript developers, you are expected to know both the things. One is called as ES5, which was introduced in the year 2009, and there is something called as ES6. So this is ES5 and this is ES6, which was introduced in the year 2015. So whenever I put 2 /, this is basically a comment in JavaScript. That's how you add a comment in JavaScript. So what happens when we add a comment? That line of code does not get executed. This is only for our reference. So you as developers right now in the industry, you're expected to know both the versions of JavaScript. You need to know how ES5 was, how does ES5 work, and what are all the new features that are there in ES6. Interview tip alert. Okay, make a note of this. Most common interview question: what are the new ES6 features that you have used? That is one most frequently asked question during an interview. Second, what is the difference between a var, let, and const? That's different ways of declaring variables. Okay, so in the past, if we had to declare a variable, we were using the var keyword. Okay, but in the new version of JavaScript, there are two new ways of declaring a variable. You can either do it with a keyword called as let, or you can use another keyword called as const. If you want to declare a variable, declare variable using let or const. Now, when do I choose let? When do I choose const? When variable value does not change, use const. When variable value changes, use let. Now in this case, in my program, when I take an input from the user, do I want the variable, the username to change in that particular program? The answer is no. Listen to this. In this program, when I take the input from the user, that variable value I do not want it to change in that particular program. Now my question to you guys is, will you use let or will you use const?
Let.
When you do not want the variable value to change, do you want to use let or do you want to use a const? Very good.
Let.
You're gonna be
Constant.
use it again. You'll be using it as a const, right? Because I don't want that username to change in that program. Next time when I run, maybe the name can change, but at least when I'm running that code, I don't want the name to change. So what I can do, I can declare my variable as const. This is a new ES6 feature. This was not there in the past. Now also there are very advantages. Const, it's called as a constant. Typically, when you declare a variable as a constant, the value of that variable cannot change. It does not change. So I'll say const variable is equal to, I will use an inbuilt method called as prompt. What is an inbuilt method? What is a method? It's a behavior. Inbuilt meaning it is already built into the language. It is already built into the browser. The name of the method is called as prompt. Now to the prompt method, I will pass one string value. That will be the title of that particular prompt. I will say enter your name. So what will happen is, when I run this particular file, there will be a input field that is seen to the user. Whatever he types will now be assigned to a variable called as username. Now my question to you guys is this: why do we use variables in a computer program? You can type it out. You don't have to unmute yourself. You can type it. Why do we use variables in a program? To store a value. Now, in JavaScript, it is optional for you to use a semicolon. If you want, at the end of the statement, very good guys, to store a value, we use variables. So, in JavaScript, you can either use a semicolon or you can decide not to use it. Both of them is going to work. Okay, I'm not going to be adding it towards the end. So, the next thing is, I want to print a greeting to the user. I will say console.log. Now using this name, I want to build out a string which says welcome to the guest game and whatever the user name is. So what we will do is we'll build out a string programmatically, which is a dynamic string. It's not a hard-coded string. So for example, if I say hello world, this is a hard-coded string. This will always print hello world. But I want to create a string which has certain characters in it, plus I want to read the value of my variable to make it dynamic. How? I can now use a concept called as string concatenation. That means to say ability to add two strings is called as string concatenation. Where will this be used? Simple example I'll give you. If you log into Gmail, what will it say? Welcome your name, isn't it? Welcome Harish. If you log in, it will say welcome Harish. If I log in, it will say welcome Anirudh. How does it know? Because once I log in, my name will be stored in a variable. They will use that particular value to display. So what we will now do is we'll implement the same concept. We will now say welcome to the guest game. Okay, so this is going to be a part of the static string, but now what I want is I want to use this particular variable called as username. How will I do? I can now use the plus operator and I will say username. So plus is known as a plus operator. So what this will do is this will add this string and this string and it will give you the output. So let me save the file. The next thing is, when you are opening this within the browser, keep in mind to keep the console open. During the development phase, it's going to be required. So keep the console open. Don't run the file immediately. Keep the console open. And then when I run this particular file, it will give me this prompt. it says enter your name. So here I will type Ani and I'll click on OK. So whatever I would have typed is now assigned to the variable, and on the next line, okay, on the next line, I'm going to be printing a string which says welcome to the guest game and the name of the person. Go ahead, try this out. Okay, don't worry about the comments, don't write down the comments. This file also I will share it with you. You guys focus on writing only the code. Comments, if you have, you can write it in your notebook. Okay, just write the code. Try this out. If you're facing some issue, close your Chrome, keep the console open, then copy this path, place it there, then run the code. Console.log means what? We want to display some message on our console. Console.log is a method which is responsible for displaying a message on our screen. Typically, this information I want to show on a web page, but for web page we need to do HTML. That is the reason I'm just using console.log method. This is also built-in method. The purpose of it is because of this method, I'm now able to print this message. Good. Once you finish, message done. Okay, good. So let's proceed. So this will bring us in completing our first task, where we have prompted the user to enter their name. We've used their name to print a greeting. So let's move on to the next task. So what we want to do is we want to generate a random number from 1 to 100 or 0 to 100 irrespective, and store it in a variable, target number variable, for the player to guess. Okay. Now you can see here, when do we have to introduce a variable in a program? These are very important things. Whenever we want to store a value within a program and to be used at a later point in time, we need to use variables. Now let's go back to that one particular point, right? We took the player's name. At a later point in time, I still want to use the name of the player to congratulate him. I want to say, good job, so and so, you guessed my number. So I still need to use that particular variable. So this is where at a later point in time means. Like if you're doing it on Flipkart, what's going to happen? When you add a product to your cart, you might go do window shopping for other products on the web page. But whatever you have added, it is still there for you to check out. Just because you went to see another product's information, that product that you had added to the cart was not removed. Here is a classic example, a variable. Because they're using it, next time when you go click on checkout, whatever items that you've added to the cart, they're showing you one below the other. Variable, very important. Yeah. So the next thing is we need to generate a random number. Now the question becomes, how do I generate a random number? Well, JavaScript does not have, it does, but it does not have a direct approach for generating a random number. It's a little different. Also, keep in mind that this console area is also purely JavaScript. Whatever I write here is going to be treated as JavaScript code, right? So I'll spend some time here kind of exploring few aspects. Now what happens is if you want to generate a random number in JavaScript, it's not a very straightforward approach. So they provide you an inbuilt method. Now you'll find all these things. At the end of the day, any software that is built, it is built based on a series of tools that are already present. So you as a developer, you're supposed to be knowing how to use all these tools to build a useful application. It is like this. At the end of the day, on a Sunday, if your mother is preparing biryani, biryani is not present in the kitchen, isn't it? There is all these basmati rice, the masalas, all the other independent ingredients that are required for preparing. What does the mother do at the end of the day? She combines all of this together in a certain process and she prepares that biryani for all of us. In the same way, you need to keep in mind as developers, typically, everything that is required for you to build a software is provided by them already. The framework, the tools are already provided by them. What you need to do is you need to construct something meaningful by using all those things. Right? That is what typically a software developer is going to do. We don't have to go invent something new. Many of the things are already present. What we need to do is we need to know how to use all of them together and assemble. Just like how our mother does in kitchen when she is preparing delicious meal, or also what a carpenter does. So our job is nothing different, is no more different than a carpenter. At the end of the day, what he does, all the raw materials is there, all the necessary items are there, but he will apply his skill. Maybe you and I cannot just go build a table or a chair. It's a special skill. So what will he do? He will use all those things and build something. In the same way, he cannot come and write software code. What we will do is we'll use all these things and build something. Okay, that's one essential thing that you need to know. Now, there's a method which is an inbuilt method. You know what a method is? What's a method? If I ask you what is a method, what would you say it is? What is a method? It's a behavior. Like, what was the behavior of the prompt method? Absolutely, method is a behavior. Some kind of a behavior was performed. What was the behavior of the prompt method? It's a function in an object. Okay, it's a little more deep, but yeah. But what was the behavior of the prompt method? It gave a alert message where we were able to give an input. Whatever we gave, it assigned to a variable. That was the behavior of it. Right? Similarly, a method called as math.random is used for generating a random number between 0 and 1. Okay? This particular method is going to generate a random number between 0 and 1. So what we can do is, because it is between 0 and 1, I want my output to be between 1 and 100. We will multiply this using the multiplication operator. I will do this. I'll use into 100. Which is still fine. So you can see that I was randomly able to generate a random number. But the problem is, it is also having decimal places. Isn't it? So it has a decimal place, but I want it to be an integer. So what we will now do is there is one more method. Whenever you have a number with a decimal place, you can convert that to an integer. So for example, if I have a number called as 3.2 or 3.4, I can convert this to either 3 or I can make this as 4. So for that, there is a method called as math.round. And if I say math.round 3.4, it will round down to its closest integer or round to its closest integer. Anything 0.5 and below, it will come to the lower integer. 0.5 and above, it will go to the upper integer. So for example, if I have something like 9.8, it will give me 10. So you can see if I want to generate a number, I am mixing multiple items that are present to make something happen. So your responsibility as software developers is, if you know in and out of what a language has to offer and what a technology or a framework has to provide, that is the first thing you need to know. Knowing what it has and how to use it. Once you know what is there and how to use it, you can combine them together and then prepare something. Now in the night, if there is roti has to be prepared at home, we have to use atta, we have to use water, we have to use some salt. Some other vessels are required to bring it into a dough. I need gas, I need tawa, I need that thing which rounds it. I take that, put it on the stove, and I have to prepare it for some time, and then I get roti. Isn't it? In the same way, many of them will say, sir, software development is very difficult, or programming is not my cup of tea. No, if you look at, in fact, if you know how to prepare a cup of tea, you can actually make programming your cup of tea. As long as you understand what process you did for doing something and figure out what is the process that needs to be done here, you will be able to get there. But will it happen overnight? That is one problem. At least if we go to the kitchen, we might have a good tea or a bad tea. But to become a software developer, it is not an overnight thing. You need to spend some good amount of time to become really good at this. Okay. So what we will now do is we'll combine all these three things together. Okay. And then make a random number. So for example, or a target number. So I know math.random into 100 will give me a random number which will fall within 1 to 100. I will now take that number and then do a round of it. I'll say math.round of math.random of 100. So by doing this, we are now able to generate a random number. So what is the purpose? We need to generate a random number. What do I need to do next? I need to store that into a variable. So what we will now focus on is I'll now create a variable. I'll call this as target number. Okay, which will be math.round of math.random into 100. So how does this work? First, math.random gets executed. It will generate that random number between 0 and 1. Then it will multiply it. You are multiplying it by 100. And that multiplied number is what you are passing to the round method. And then it will give you a rounded integer, or it will give you an integer that you can now store it inside a variable called as the target number. Now one thing I wanted to observe here. This variable target number, I did not call it as t, or I did not call it as tn, or I did not call it as star, or I did not call it as n. I was very specific, like for user also, I didn't say use u. I made it as user. It's an important skill, guys. You need to keep in mind, when you are developing a software, you have to give proper and good variable names. Maybe when you're working in your college, when you're studying engineering, the maximum project code that you wrote was maybe 10 lines or 15 lines, 20 lines. But you need to keep in mind, and moreover, we never came back to our program to make any kind of a changes to it in the future. I finished that semester. Let me move on. We don't even see what we wrote in the practical book. But you need to keep in mind that does not happen in a company. When you are assigned to a project, you will be working on that project for a substantial period of time. When I say substantial, for a certain number of months. Sometimes it can also go on 2 years. So you will always be revisiting your project to build new features. Now, if you do not give meaningful names in your project, 1 month down the line, 2 months down the line, when you come back and look at the code, you will not know what is happening there. So that is the reason you should give good variable names so that it will explain what you are doing. So I'm creating a variable called as target number. And you also have a certain style that I've used here, where this is all in small letter and the next word is in capital letter. That is because we are using something called as a camel casing. It's like the hunch of a camel, where the first word, all characters, is going to be in small letters, and in the second word, it's going to be in capital. Only the first letter is going to be in capital. I cannot give a space will not work. I could just write everything in the same line, like this. But it is not readable and is not advisable also. So hence, whenever you're declaring a variable, and if your variable has two names to it or two words to it, then you have to use camel casing. For example, if you are building an e-commerce store, the items in the cart, whatever the user adds, maybe you will have a variable to track it. So you can call it as cart line items, right? If you don't do that, see how it look. Cart line items. You think it's readable? No, right? So that's the reason you have to write it in camel case. Cart. Every next word is going to be in capital letter, not all uppercase. There's a difference between capital and uppercase. Capital is the first character is going to be in capital. Uppercase is everything is going to be in capitals. Like for example, if I do cart line items, this is uppercase. That's not what a camel case is. Okay. So what we'll do is, for our reference, we will display what the target number that we generated. So let's go back, reload the page. I will say Ani. It says, we'll check that out. It says welcome to the guess game Ani. And then it's a good thing that this happened. It says uncaught reference error. Target number is not defined. So what is this error? This was not intentional. Okay, it's not that I wanted to show you this error. It just happened while coding. It is fine. It's good that something like this came up. Whenever you have a reference error, that means to say whatever variable you're trying to refer to, it does not exist in your program. So when a variable you're trying to use in your program has not been declared anywhere in your program, it will typically give you something called as a reference error. So let's check out what is the issue. You can see that while explaining the target number, I had made everything in small. Can you see here? But here it is in camel case. So let me just change this. So come back, reload the page, enter your name and say Ani. It says welcome to the guess game Ani. So 43, what is it? It's basically the target number our system has generated. You know lottery systems? That's what happens, right? Among the 1,000 people who have registered, one of them randomly is chosen. Same logic behind the scene. Alright, go ahead. So this also brings us completion of the second task. Once you finish, message done. So what is the sequence of execution? First math.random. It does not go like that. First math.random, then multiply, that value is given to math.round. Okay, so this is how we basically generate a random number in JavaScript. Of course, there are different variations to this. I don't want to get into the variations because it's going to take us a lot more time in exploring those aspects. But yeah, for now, this is how you would generate a random number in JavaScript. Now, do you think I should have called it as const? Do you think it's an ideal way of declaring this variable, or should we have called it as let? Do you think it should have been called as const, or do you think it should have been called as let? Const, isn't it? Yeah, keep in mind, if you say let, that means to say somewhere else in my program I can actually change that value. Like for example, if I call this as let, then I could have changed this value to something else. But whenever you declare a variable as a const, watch this, and if I try to change the number of it, so when I say enter your name, you can see 23 was the target number that got generated. If I try to assign a new value to it, it will throw an error. It says assignment to a constant variable, isn't it? So it's a good way. It's a way for us to protect ourselves by accidentally making changes. In the past, it was not there, right? So this gives us a very good cushion for ensuring that our variables don't change, the values don't change. Okay, good. Shall we proceed? All of you have done this? Okay. Next, let's move on to the next one. Anybody who is facing some error? Did you get any error? For your reference, let me also parallelly share the source code just in case you guys have some error. You can check it out. You can cross verify. Okay, good. Let's proceed. So the next thing is we need to keep track of how many guesses the player has made, and also before each guess we need to tell them how many maximum guesses they have. Okay, now watch this. This is a classic example of your OTP authentication. If you've done or if you've tried logging into a banking website, how many chances do they give you to give the proper email and password? Sometimes 3, sometimes 5, isn't it? There is already a maximum time you can log in. Every time you give, they're trying to keep track of how many times you've logged in, isn't it? Are you guys able to relate to this concept that we're going to be exploring to logging in to any of the banking websites? I want you to type IR, I relate. If you've tried net banking, I'm sure many of you would have tried, you would have seen something like this. That's what we are doing it at a trimmed down version. But as you can see, you will start to identify that it is the same set of things that are there for you to prepare or for you to build any kind of software. It's quite essential to see this. Many a times people think that, oh, whatever I study is not what is used in the industry. No, it's not that. Whatever you study is the same exact thing you will use in the industry. Because there is no student JavaScript and IT professional JavaScript. No. Even in a software company, people will be using the const keyword for declaring a variable if the value of the variable does not change. It's going to be the same thing. Things do not differ. Okay, that is the reason I always tell my students, focus on the fundamentals. As long as you are fundamentally strong and if you know how each of them correlate with one another, you can actually build any kind of an application that you want. It's true. Now, as an activity, in fact, your mother would be very interested, or she'll be very surprised. Go to her after the workshop is over. Ask her, tell me 5 ingredients. Using the same 5 ingredients, what different food items I can prepare. Permutation combination, if you do, what are the food items you can prepare? Just check with her. In the same way, if you know the fundamentals of a certain programming language, it's just the combination of each of them is the same that's going to be used for building a video streaming app like Netflix, to build a taxi booking app like Uber, or a e-commerce store like Amazon. Just like how we are figuring out how many guesses a player has made against what is the maximum number of guesses that is there. Yeah. So keep track of how many guesses the player has made. So first and foremost, we need to kind of decide what is the maximum guesses we want to give the player. So how do I declare my variable? Letter const. It's a fixed number. I will say in my program, user is given 5 chances. How will you declare the variable as? Let or const. Very good. You will declare it as a const. You will not say const max chances or max tries. You can come up with a variable name is equal to 5. We are now saying that, okay, in our program, we are going to allow the user to guess 5 times. Or I can call this as max guesses. Okay. When the program starts, listen to my question very carefully. When the program starts, how many times the user has guessed? 0. Now he will go on to guess. He will guess it wrong. Now how many times has he guessed? When the program starts, how many times the user has guessed? 0. He will then go on to guess. He will guess it wrong. Now, at this point of time, how many times has he already guessed? 1. Okay. What was the variable value? It was 0. It now became 1. Now, let me ask you this question. Should I declare this particular variable as a let or a const? Should I declare this particular variable as a let or a const? Beautiful. All of you guys are saying it should be declared as a let. Why? Because we want the values to change. For example, if I have a variable called as player guess and I set it to 0, and then I declare it as a const, somewhere else in my program, if I try to do player guess plus plus or increment the value of player guess, it will not work. Why? Because I declared it as a const. So keep in mind, certain variables are going to be declared as a constant, certain variables are going to be declared as a let. These two ways of declaring. Sir, you told me there was one more way, var. You said, sir, you told me that there was var also. Should I be using it? No. Only if the company is working on old projects. Then you will be using var. Sir, how old is sir? If the project was less than 2015, because ES6 was not introduced, they will be using old features. But majority, 95% of the projects running in the industry are all with ES6 features. So you will be using let and const. So what will happen if I now declare it as a let? What will happen? I can now keep increasing the count of the user. Do you see the difference? Let and const. Also, as a developer, when you declare a variable, this is giving you a very nice way of identifying what your variable is doing in your code. When somebody just blanks, okay, if I come and today look at the project, I'll be like, okay, these variables, okay, these should not change in my program. This should change. Or you imagine when you start working in a company, in the project, the company will assign you into, if they had used var for everything, don't you have a doubt? Okay, this variable, will it change, not change? Should it change, not change? But now with ES6 features, when you come to that particular project and when you look at the source code, you know, okay, this variable, okay, I should not touch this. I should not change. I can read the value, but I should not change the value. This is the kind of readability you will get in your code when you're using let, const, things like that. Does this make sense? I want to type ms. Difference between let and const, and also the advantage of let and const. Yeah? Okay, good. Now, of course, I can spend the whole day speaking about variables. I can spend the whole day speaking about variables. There's so many things about this, intricate details. And also you have to keep in mind whenever you're studying something, okay, I want you guys to come out of this mindset. You're not studying to get marks. You're not studying this to get marks. You're studying this to build your life. Isn't it? With the knowledge that you get, you want to find a job. Once you find a job, you will have a better life. So don't have the same attitude that you had while you were studying in college. It is not going to help you. It's not going to take you anywhere. When you are studying, you have to study deep. Now, imagine this, right? Why do you think a software developer is paid up to 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs as a fresher? That is, why do you think somebody will be given? Let's not go to the higher level. Let's come down. Average. Why is a software developer given 30,000 rupees as a fresher every month? Just think about it, right? Month on month, if a company is going to be paying you, surface level knowledge, will it help you? So you need to go deep. In whatever you study, go deep. Don't have the same college mindset. Because in your initial round, company, if they're paying you money on a regular basis, do you think chumma they will take you to the company? No, right? They will completely evaluate you. That's the reason why interviews are conducted, isn't it? They will go deep. They not just ask here and there. They'll go deep. They'll try to understand. They will try to understand your understanding of technology. Only then they will take you into the company. Right? Okay, good. Let's come back. So this is taken care. What's the next thing? The next thing is So we've done this, right? Keep track of how many guesses the player has made. Before each guess, tell them how many guesses they have. Okay, fair enough. So we now need to prompt the player to make a guess as to what the target number is. Now, can you tell me how I can take input from the user now? Which method can I use to take input from the user? Very good. I can use the prompt method. But if I'm using a web page, when I learn HTML, how can I take input from the user? You will be building a form. Through form, you will take input. From here, you will take from prompt. Okay. So now the question becomes this, right? We have to stop here and kind of think about our strategy moving forward. Okay, taking input from the user is fine. We will do that. But what if he guesses the number wrong? We should say, oops, your guess was high. Oops, your guess was low. Then should I stop my program? No, isn't it? I should give him one more turn. Guess my number. Then he will put that number. Then again you will check, is it less or is it more? Or is it equal? If it is less, you will say, oops, guess was less. Should you stop there? No, again you will want to give him one more try. How many tries? 5. Now here is where it could also happen the first time, isn't it? On a banking website, you give your email and password correctly, you just log in. If you give wrong, then again you will start. Again you will start. Or to a certain number of times. So this is where another concept of programming is going to come. It's going to get combined, Gautam. The concept is called as loop. Right? The concept is called as loops. Now what is loops? If you want to execute a piece of code a certain number of times, then you will use a loop for it. If you want to execute a piece of code a certain number of times, I can use a loop. I could also write the same piece of code one below the other 5 times. But you know, it is not too sensible. Forget feasible. It is not sensible doing that, isn't it? So that is where loops come into picture. Now what we want to do is being in a position to take this input from the user. And then what Gautam has prompted to check for condition. Is it less? Is it more? Is it equal? Right? We're going to be combining that. So what we will do is we will use one of the looping. There are many different loops that are available. There is a for loop. There is a while loop. There is also a do while loop. Not very popular, but it's still there. There is a for off loop. There is a for in loop. There is a for each loop. Okay. So there are many different loops available, and each of them, they have their own purpose. Now, I don't want to get into each of the loopings, but I'll stick to what is going to be required here. But maybe after the workshop, you can go check out what the other loops are. So the loop that we're going to be using is called as a while loop. Right? So when is a while loop suitable? There's a for loop also. When is a for loop suitable? A for loop is suitable when you want to execute the code for a fixed number of times. Let me repeat. For loop is used when you want to execute code a fixed number of times. Meaning what? I want to print from 1 to 10. I know 1 to 10. I will use a for loop because the purpose of that for loop is to run the code a fixed number of times. Now what is the purpose of the while loop? When you do not know how many times do you want to execute the loop, then you will use a while loop. when you know fixed number of times to loop, for loop. When you do not know, then you will use a while loop. Now you might be thinking, array, what is this you do not know? You do not know. I'll tell you how you do not know. Because you do not know whether the code inside while loop will run once or twice or 5 times. What does that mean? What if the user guesses in the first attempt itself? Now will you still run the loop 4 more times? No, right? Maybe the user guesses the number second time or the third time. Will you still run the remaining number of times? No. Then you will use a while loop. Classic example here, login of your OTPs. Fixed number of times you need to run it, or you do not know how many times you want to run it, you will use a while loop there. Anyway, let's come back. So, to your while loop, we are now going to be checking for a certain condition. Right? There are something called as conditional operators. Different types of operators are there. Whenever you want to apply, whenever you want the comparison of two numbers or comparison of two values, you will use something called as a conditional operator. So here I would want to try. Now if what will my condition be? If my player guess is less than my max guess, watch this. Here I am using a conditional operator. It is less than. So what is player guess? 0. Is 0 less than 5? So whenever you are using a conditional operator, keep in mind it will always return a Boolean value. That's also another data type. Right? Boolean, true or false. So in this case, it will evaluate to true. So when the condition is true, then the block of code is going to get executed. Now you might already be thinking, yeah, sir, so many things I should remember, is it? Answer is yes. Is there an easier way for me to do? The answer is no. Again, you need inspiration. Where will you go? You just go to your kitchen. Have you seen the number of ingredients in your kitchen? Now, how many ingredients are there? There's a bunch of ingredients that are there, isn't it? Each of it is being used for feeding you. Same way, when you are learning, if you want to be a software developer, there's a lot of these things that are there. You need to learn that. Only then you can start building meaningful things. Now you see a simple while loop, you're able to relate it to an OTP login or a system login. Now if this condition is true, then I want to ask the user to enter whatever his guess is, right? So I'll now say const player, I'll just call it as guess, whatever his guess or guess number. Again I'll say prompt guess my number. So I'll just ask him to guess the number. So what is that I need to do? If the user prompt the player to guess the number, okay, that is taken care. I will finish this, then I'll give you time to add. If the player guess is less than the target number, say oops, your guess was low. If your player guess was greater than the target number, say the guess was high. So what do we do now? We will now say if the player guess, if the guess number, that is what the number the user has guessed, if the guess number is less than the target number, then this is where logic is going to be written. In a program, you're going to be using if statements for writing logic. I can now say console.log oops your guess was low. Now, is there only one thing that we are checking for? No, isn't it? If it is less, I want to print this. If it is high, I want to print oops, your guess was high. Or if it is none of this, that means to say he's guessed the number. Or if the number is equal, then you will say he's guessed the number, isn't it? So if you want to check for multiple conditions, here we are checking for multiple conditions. Is it less? Is it more? Is it equal? Then what we can use is we can use something called as else if statements. So I can now do if this, else if the guess number is greater than the target number, I can say oops, your guess was high. I can either have an else statement. If it's none of this, then it should be the other one. Or I could also still say if the guess number is equal to the target number, then I can say good job. Then I want to display the name of the user, right? Variable, store it so that I can use it in a later point of time. I've stored it here and I'm going to be using it here. Good job, username, you guessed my number. Can you see here? Now what's going to happen? Whenever the program runs, what is the player guess? It is 0. If 0 less than 5, it is true. Then I'll ask system, okay, guess my number. Whatever input I give, I store it into this variable. And then we will use the different conditional operators. Remember conditional operators, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, along with statements, if statements. I'll say if, else if. This is how logic is written in a program. Like, is the password and the email the same? If it is true, then allow him to log in. Else, say invalid email or password. All of that is happening through if statements, if else if statements. Right? So let's run this code and see what progress we would have made. So if I run the code, it says enter your name. I'll say Ani. So the target number is 56. It says guess my number. If I say 50, it says oops, your guess was low. If I say 60, it now says oops, your guess was high. Now there is something that is missing. Can you guys guess what it is? Can you think about what is one more aspect? Chances left, okay, that is one. Apart from that, the count. Every time a player is guessing, we need to increment the count, isn't it? So right now what has happened is this is an infinite game, it will keep running. Even if we guess the number also, it will say, good job Ani, you guessed my number, and then it will keep continuing to run. That's not what we want. So what we will have to do, or what we'll have to take care is, each time this condition has failed, I always want to increment the value of my player guess by 1. I'll now say player guess is equal to player guess plus 1. Meaning, for the first time, if the number is not guessed properly, it will say, oops, your guess was low. It will come below. It will now increment the value of player guess by 1. So we'll say player guess plus 1, assign it to player guess. So now 0 becomes 1. It will go back to the beginning of the loop, check for the condition. 1 less than 5, true, happens. Let's say wrong guess. 2 less than 5, true, enter, increment. 3 less than 5, true, enter increment, as this is based if he's not giving the right input, that is right. So on and so forth, it will run. At one point of time it becomes 5. 5 less than 5 is false. That means to say is run out of all his turns. Okay, so this is with regards to ensuring that every time a player is guessing, we are incrementing the value by 1. So that's how every time you give a wrong email and password, there will be one variable whose value is getting incremented. Every time you put a wrong password, value gets increased. If you give it a wrong password, value gets increased. So on and so forth. Right? Super. Alright. So let me just share. I hope you guys are able to follow. I want to type IF, I follow. If you're able to follow this, I want to type IF, I follow. Okay, very nice. Good. Let me just share this code with you guys, because this might take some time for you guys to kind of type it out. You can use this code, analyze it, take few minutes time to analyze this code. You add it onto your code. Okay. You run the code also in your browser. Just check if things are going as per plan. Very good. That's a good question that Yashwant has asked. Good identification, man. I like it. So Yashwant's question is on line number 27. I've used the const keyword one more time. Will it not throw an error? So that would require a deeper explanation of mine moving forward. You need to keep in mind scope is based on variables declaration is based on scopes. So there are different kind of scopes in a program. There is something called as a global scope. There is something called as a function scope. There is called as a block scope. So whenever I have an opening and a closing flower brackets, then a new scope is created called as a block scope. Now this variable inside that block can only be declared once. So if I try to do this one more time here, if I somewhere I change the number here, this will be an error. But every time a loop runs, another block is created. So because different blocks are created, it will not be any kind of an error. Let me just give you a quick let me just give you a very quick input on that. So just think of it this way, Yashwant. That's a good question you asked. So every time you run a loop, okay, it's like a while loop, there is a block that gets created. Think of it like a container. Once the loop runs the first time, there is one block created. If the loop runs the second time, there is one more block created. Okay, it's like a container in memory that happens. So one of the features of a block scope or a const keyword is inside the block, okay, you can create that particular variable, but you cannot create the variable one more time. Like for example, what do we have? We have the variable called as guess number, right? So inside this block, I can create the variable, assign a value to it. Next time also in my code, my code can still say const gn, because the second time the looping happens, a second block gets created. So right now, is it the same block or is it a different block? Obviously, it's a different block. So declarations are also based on blocks. Different declarations are also based on scopes. Okay. Here is a classic example of something called as a block scope. There are others also. There's something called as a function scope. Of course, we cannot get into all these things. There's also something called as a global scope. There's also something called as a lexical scope. Like this, there are different scopes available. So this is an example for a block scope. Yeah. Does this give you a little better clarity? Yeah. Do you want to take that diagram down? Yeah, you understood. Very good. Okay, great. Once you guys have finished, I want you to message done. Okay, good. Now, in all of this, there is one more thing that is not as per our plan. Okay, so if I have to run this, because there was a bug without incrementing, so this will keep running. So what I'll do is I'll just open in a new file and close the previous window, and also keep our inspect open. That's how you can do it. Or easy thing for you to do is just shut down your. Easy thing for you to do would be just shut down your Chrome and restart it one more time. So I'll just paste this here now. So it now says enter your name. I will say Ani. So it says welcome to the guest game Ani. The target number is 36. If I still type 36, it'll say good job Ani, you guessed my number. But again, you see it goes back to the beginning of the loop. Remember, when do you use a while loop? When will you use a while loop? When we don't know the exact number of times the looping needs to run. Right? So here the user guessed, I should not go back to the beginning of the loop and then run, isn't it? So this will keep running 5 times, then it stops. But the point is it's not run 5 times, right? So I need to come out of my loop. So for which we can use something called as a break statement. Okay, there's something called as break. It's one of the loop controls. It's called as a loop control. to control how the looping is gonna work. So when you say break, it's gonna come out of the loop. So when I use break, it's gonna come out of the loop from there. So let's try this one more time. If I go back, reload the page, if I type in my name, and if the target number is 80, it says good job Ani, you guessed my number. It says good job Ani, you guessed my number. So for that you'll have to use break. So what happens? You're breaking from the looping process. The moment the user has guessed, you're breaking from the looping process. Yeah, good. We're going to be using break. So the next question becomes, okay, what if the user has tried all the turns and he has not guessed the number, right? So let's go back to our wireframe. We've taken care of this. We've taken care of this. The last milestone is, if the player runs out of turns without guessing correctly, say sorry you didn't get my number, and my number was whatever the target number was, isn't it? So how can we do this? Again, you have to think of a logic. It all boils down to breaking it down and start thinking about the logic. Again, for any problem, there are different approaches that you can take. One of the approaches that you can consider is you can base it on the variable called as player guess. Now let me ask you this question, and I want to see how many of you answer this. Listen to my question very carefully. If the player did not guess the number correctly at all, outside the loop, what do you think the value of player guess is going to be? Player guess is going to be 5. Some of you are saying player guess is going to be 6. Some of you are saying 5. Okay. So you need to see that at a certain point of time, player guess would have become 5. You're starting at 0, isn't it? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So at 4 itself, all the 5 tries is over. Then when you make player guess plus plus, it now becomes the number 5. So is 5 less than 5? It is false. So when you come out, player guess will actually be the value of 5. Check this out. So if I say player guess, let's run this. Ani 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. You can see that player guess is basically 5. So what you can do now, we can actually compare player guess with the max guesses. See, this is how construction of your logic is going to happen. If you look at the whole problem at once, it is difficult to understand how to go about it. But if you kind of break it down into smaller pieces, then it becomes much more user friendly. Okay. So now you can say something like, if player guess is equal to the max guesses, when this happens, now what does it mean? It means to say that the user has not guessed the number. So we can now say, sorry, you did not guess my number. Number is what? Target number. Come back, run the, oh, not here. First go to the browser, run the code, enter your name, and now if I do this, and if I don't do this, it says, sorry, you did not guess my number. My number is 16. So by doing this, we are also taking care of if the player runs out of turns without guessing correctly, say sorry, you didn't get my number. My number was whatever the target number is. You can now go on to show it to the user. Yeah, so you can just do this. One thing you have to do is you have to ensure that this is done outside your full all the conditions haven't been met, then you will want to do this. Of course, it might still, for people who are getting started, it might still be a little overwhelming, but I just want to give you an idea as to how things work. Right? What are all the things that are involved while you're developing projects? Yes, Naveen, you've raised your hand.
Sir, I think, okay. So third, this one, what you call steps. I think
Hmm.
something is missing in third step.
Which one? Okay, so
Tasking,
yes,
task.
so keep track of how many guesses the
Huh.
player has made that we have done. Let them know how many guesses they are left, isn't it? So what we can do is guess my number. Here we can say you are left with. Here we can display how many chances are left. What we can do max guess minus the player guess. So like this, what you can do, you can now still okay. How many chances are left for? Max guess is 5. 5 minus 0 is 5. You can now say you're left with 5 chances. The next time player guess increases, it goes, and you will now say 5 minus 1 is 4. You're saying 4 chances are left. So like this, you will be able to utilize. Again, importance of variables, guys. Good. Naveen, you brought this up. But again, important of variables, guys. To store values in a program to be used at a later point in time. This is what it really means. I'm able to refer to this particular variable here and then play around with it.
Sir, can we use this one also, like the number of guess you are used out of 5 and plus guess number? That's it. We can add
Number of guess.
number of guess you are used out of 5
Huh.
plus guess number, because
Huh.
guess numbers will get increased. No, that
Huh.
5 that one.
Yeah. But again, what you're doing is you're showing him, okay, you finished one guess, two guesses, three guesses, like that. But here we are just coming from the decrementing order, saying how many guesses are left.
Okay, okay,
Yeah. So we're just decrementing it, so telling him how many guesses are left for him.
are left.
Yeah. But of course, you can change it around to suit how you would want the
Hmm.
text to display to the user. Yeah. Wow, we're still maintaining the full audience. Surprising. Good. Barring a couple of them because their battery ran out, it looks like all of them are present. Nice.
We are enjoying, sir.
Once you finish, I want you to message done. Awesome. Cool. So why don't we quickly summarize um, what we guys have went on to learn? Yeah. Hmm. Yes. So some of the main aspects of JavaScript that we learned is we learned that there are two versions of JavaScript that you have to study, ES5 and ES6. One of the aspects of ES6, right? ES6 has around 15 new features. Just one of them we have used here. Maybe we could have used one more, but that could have been done maybe next time. So out of 15, we've kind of explored one, but you need to know that there are many more features that are there. Okay, while we are here, why don't we just do this? Let's make it as two features of ES6. So what happens here is we are using something called as string concatenation. By using the plus operator, we can add two strings. But there's a pretty awesome feature that is available in ES6. It's called as template literal. Okay, template literal is ES6 way of concatenation, and it's like extensively used in the industry, guys. So what happens is here you have to play with this plus operator, and somewhere at the bottom also you saw good job. Maybe I can take that as an example. Okay, I'll take this as an example. So here we have done something like, okay, ES6 way of concatenation. We said good job, username, you guessed my number, all of that. We started with a string, we used the plus sign, used a variable, started with a string again. It is kind of very tricky. So what in ES6 they've provided is a really cool feature. We can do something like console.log, and you can use something called as a backtick. Okay, backtick. Many of you might not even have ever used this key on your keyboard. This is the key right next to the number 1. So when you use this, it's a backtick. We have to use a backtick, otherwise it's not going to work. So I can now do something like good job. Now the really cool feature of ES6 template literal is the ES6 way of performing string concatenation is I don't have to leave this place. Inside here, I can now use any variable. So earlier you see that I created a string. I had to use a plus operator, variable, plus operator, and a string. But now I don't have to leave the string at all. I can just use a dollar opening and a closing flower brackets. Okay, I can just use a dollar opening and a closing flower brackets, and then I can just use my variable there. See how clean this is? I can say good job. Username, whatever the value of username will now be replaced here. I don't have to use this plus operator several times. I can just say you guessed my number. Now this is extremely useful when you're building a large string. In the past, you had to create string and plus operator, variable, plus operator, string, plus operator. It was very messy. MESSY, messy. But now, if you're using template literal or the ES6 way of doing concatenation, you don't have to leave. If there's another variable that I have to use, no problem. How many chance did you use? Okay, you guessed it in whatever that chances, in those many chances you've guessed. Any number of variables I can keep adding from here. useful stuff. You can replace this line of code and see. One of my personal favorites of ES6 is this feature, ES6 template literal. Okay, let's come back. Okay, so what did we learn about? We learned about two versions, ES5 and ES6. Both of them are required. In interviews, they'll ask, tell me how is this feature different from this feature? They will ask you this. Let and const. We learned the difference between let and const. Why let and const? We understood what a method is. We used a prompt method. Then we understood how to generate a random number. When to choose a const, when to choose a let. Const versus let. Again, interview question. Why we use a while loop? When do we have to decide to use a while loop? What are the different loops that are there? Conditional statements, like if else, how it will work. If the condition is true, then it'll execute this line. If it does not, then it'll go check for the condition, execute this line. If this not, it'll check for this condition, it'll execute this line. It works that way. Then we learned about template literal. Then we learned about the break keyword and also conditions. The whole purpose of what conditions are, right? So these are all the basic building blocks for any kind of an application that you will build. Now, even if you want to build a software of your own, you still are going to be using the same kind of topics or items, and then you will go on to build it. Of course, whatever we have covered today, it is just a drop in an ocean. Okay, there are many things that are there, but I hope this gave you an idea about what JavaScript is, what is the future of JavaScript, and how the language is like, because that's also important. Is it something that you can follow along if you invest time? Maybe you wouldn't have understood it entirely, it is fine, but at least 70 to 80% you understood what is what. Imagine you do the same thing tomorrow, 100% you'll understand, isn't it? Okay, great. Wow, we've overshot by 15 minutes. Yes, guys, wonderful. Now, based on what we have covered so far, do you have any questions? Based on what we have covered so far, do you have any questions? Okay, I will say clear. You have to type in crystal. Okay. Are these things clear? Okay, awesome. Just one. So what is the difference between printf and console.log? So printf is C's way of printing it to the terminal. Console.log is JavaScript way of doing things. Now, as you can see, the concepts continue to remain the same. In other languages also, the same things are there. There are also variables, methods, conditional statements, loops are there. Even in JavaScript also it is like that. Like if you take a mother tongue and English, there also there are alphabets, here also there is alphabets. So few things are going to change here and there. That's what typically is going to be happening. Yes, Naveen?
Sir, in this const and let I understood, but my one question, because in other programming language I heard that I just followed a little bit. So whether by default it is in the text format or it will be in number, like if I want to take only number, I don't want to take text. So whether it will be in future this one covered or do we need to mention?
Okay, your question is when you declare a variable.
Yeah, by default it will be in text, right? Or how?
Yeah, so typically what happens is when you're working with JavaScript at the browser level,
Okay.
any input you take from the user, it'll always be as string or text in your case, but ideally the data type is called as string.
Okay.
Now the question becomes the user has entered 10. Why is it a string? Yes or no?
Yeah. Yeah.
The user has entered a number 10. Then why is it read as string? That is because you need to understand JavaScript is integrated into HTML, isn't it? That's how you write JavaScript code. Yes or no? Where do we write JavaScript code on the front end? We write it in a HTML file. Now, what does HTML stand for? Hypertext Markup Language. It's a text based thing. So, any input that is given, it'll always be as a string by default. That's the nature. Then, what we have to do as developers is we have to do implicit type conversions. We'll have to do an explicit type conversions. That means is I shall have to convert it from a number string type to a number type. So there are methods available. So you
Your
could do something
requirement.
like parse int of guess number. So when you do this, it will convert the string data type to the number data type. So that's how you will manage it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Right? There's parse int. There is number of. There is parse float. Many ways there are. Instead of giving a number in prompt, if we use an alphabet, then we can output alphabet, please type a number. Again, you can do that. There is something called as an ASCII number. For numbers, there will be a certain ASCII character. If it falls within it, then you can say that, hey, you're adding an alphabet. Use only a number. So like that, you will be able to do. Or if you go deeper into it, there are different type conversions that are available. Maybe in today's session I might not be able to get into it. If you try to convert an alphanumeric into a number, then it will give you something called as a nan. It is called as not a number. So whenever you get a nan value, that means to say the user has given an alphanumeric or some alphabet. Through that you can manage. So that's how we will basically go about it. You can try it out. Maybe the starting point for you is you can do this, do a parse int and then give an alphanumeric and see what you will get. You will get something special. It's called as NaN. It stands for not a number. Do a conditional check of it and then control it in your program. Okay? Super. How many of you found this session to be useful? I want you to type in useful if you found this session to be useful. All right, good. So I told you guys that for those of you who will stick around till the end, I'm going to be giving you away some useful stuff. So let me just share it with you. You can download it, okay? So this is going to be the frequently asked top 10, okay? It's not all. Top 10 frequently asked questions of JavaScript along with answers. Okay, so this is for your reference. So here I've spoken about varlet and const, some of the ES6 features. You can download it. And the next one is basically a roadmap. In case you want to become full stack developers, you take this approach. Okay, many of them will say do HTML, CSS. It is required, no doubt, but people will only get stuck in HTML, CSS. They don't go forward. In your interview, you are evaluated on JavaScript, React. 90% of the time, it's going to be on that. Only 10 to 15% is going to be HTML and CSS. But if somebody wants to learn front end, they will start with HTML, CSS. They'll spend months together just learning that. Don't do that. Become strong programmatically. That is what companies will be focusing on. So, in the roadmap that I've shared, whatever that we have done, which has helped hundreds of people land jobs, this is the approach that we always tell them. Start with JavaScript. Let me just bring this up. Yeah. So I'll always tell people start with JavaScript. Okay, that's the approach that we take, or I take in teaching people how to become full stack developers. Learn ES5 and ES6, then you learn HTML and CSS. So by doing this, you're able to give lot more time for JavaScript. You have to become strong in programming because your first round of interview, telephonic round, will be JavaScript round. So you need to be strong with JavaScript. So the more time you invest is going to be better. Then learn HTML, CSS. Then learn something called as JavaScript in browser. Then learn React, followed by Redux, followed by Node.js, followed by Express. Don't mix it up. I find many students trying to mix everything. React, Redux, they'll study together. Or they'll study HTML, React, Redux together. Shouldn't do that. Keep in mind, it's not only for marks. If you just know surface level topics, it is fine. You go write exam. Even if you forget those topics the moment you finish the exam, it is still fine. Right? No. At least the next 20 to 25 years of your life is going to be dependent on this. So you need to be like really strong. Right? Super. Alright guys. Can you all come on the video for a second? Let me just get a chance to see you guys once. So nice. Good. Good. Nice to see you all. Awesome. So I hope you all enjoyed this particular session. Yes. If you enjoyed, give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Very nice. All right. So I do believe that there have been few questions that you guys have regarding regarding the course, the format. Well, will I get a job? This is my background. How do I go about it? Things like that. So, though I wanted to kind of have it today, but we have very clearly overshot our time. It's already 9:30. I don't want to rush into the next part. Like I did not want to rush in the training part. Okay. So here is what we're gonna be doing. Um, Jyoti ma'am will again coordinate with you on another date where we're gonna have that Q&A of I've gone through your questions. Like many of you have told, I'm still studying. How do I manage? I've passed out 3 years back. How will I manage? Will I have placement opportunities? All those kind of questions you guys have asked. So what we'll do is to address that, we will have one more session sometime this week. Okay. So on that day, we'll go directly to those questions and I will clarify, or I will give you my suggestions for your career. Okay, is that all? Are you guys okay with it? I want to type I am O. I am okay with it. Super. All right then. So with this being said, let us wrap up today's session here. I hope you guys found this to be valuable, and I'm very happy to see you guys be here till the end. Okay. All right. I wish you all the very best. Take care. Good night. Take care of yourself. All right. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yes, sir. Good night.